Ever wonder who a matchmaker would never date? I mean, the person who spends their life helping other people fall in love, who makes a living spotting chemistry and occasionally chaos. Who makes them say, absolutely not? After matching thousands of people over the years, my own deal breaker list has evolved. Not because I got fussier, but because I've seen up close what actually builds connection and what quietly rots it from the inside out. And no, I'm not talking about the obvious ones. We all know to avoid the person who doesn't do drama but somehow attracts it like a magnet everywhere they go. That's basic. I'm talking about the subtler red flags, the ones that seem harmless at brunch but will have you Googling emotional exhaustion by month 6. The quiet warning signs you only learn to hear after a decade of listening to the love stories go off the rails. So today I'm pulling back the curtain. As a matchmaker, here's who I would never date. That sounds at all interesting. I hope you'll stick around because that's what's on the agenda. I would never date somebody who isn't kind. And I don't mean the obvious stuff. Most people aren't walking around kicking puppies or stealing parking spots from pregnant women. They're just not kind, neutral at best. And here's where you see it. Watch how they treat people who can't do anything for them. Last month, I watched a guy snap his fingers at a server at a restaurant. Not a wave, not a, excuse me, when you get a second. No, this was an actual finger snapping, like he was trying to wake up a dog. His date just sat there doing that thing that we all do when we see something we don't want to see. She kind of just turned her head, ignoring it, and made an excuse in her head, probably. Told herself he was probably just having a off moment or a bad day. No, he wasn't having a bad day. He was having his regular personality, and she was meeting it for the first time. Because here's what I do know after doing this for years: how somebody treats people who can't do anything for them is how they actually are. That version shows up the second the honeymoon phase ends. And the honeymoon phase always ends. Usually right around the time you get the flu and need them to pick up soup without, sighing about it like you've asked them to donate a kidney. So, if your date's rude to the server or dismissive to the person who's bagging groceries or talks to customer service like they're reading from a script called How to Ruin Somebody's Tuesday, you've already seen how this ends. I would never date somebody who's terrible with money. I'm not talking about how much they make. I'm talking about what they actually do with it. Some people make good money, but they're always broke. Not because rent went up or something like that, like their car died, but because they don't know how to say no to that thing that they want right now, the shoes or the vacation they can't actually afford. Their savings account is running on fumes and a prayer. You know the type, right? There's no emergency fund, no retirement plan if they're over 50, just a credit card doing all the heavy lifting and some vague theory about how the universe will provide. The universe, not a financial advisor, Kevin. Here's the thing about people who can't delay gratification with money: they usually can't delay it with anything else either. Patience, not commitment, or staying through the hard parts. If they can't say no to a pair of sneakers they don't need, good luck when things get uncomfortable and you need them to work through something instead of just bailing. And eventually, when reality shows up with the bill, they're looking around for somebody to soften the landing, somebody to explain to them why retirement at 68 with $17 and good vibes maybe wasn't the best plan. Yeah, I'm good. I would never date someone who can't show physical affection. I'm not talking about grand romantic gestures or recreating the Notebook in the rain. I'm talking about warmth, holding my hand for sure, putting their arm around me in a crowd, opening a door because chivalry is not dead and doesn't really need resuscitating. It just needs a man to do those basic nice things because he's, nice. Some people are allergic to tenderness. They treat physical affection like it's a performance that they didn't sign up for. Every touch feels calculated. Every gesture feels like they're checking a box on some relationship compliance form. I don't walk far when I take Tallulah out. She doesn't exactly have the patience or the momentum. Just a little stroll around the neighborhood, which happens to be the perfect amount of time to wear my red light therapy mask. Most people wouldn't do that. I get it. But I don't care what the neighbors say. Really, what are they going to say? That this mask uses red light and near infrared light, the two most studied and trusted wavelengths? That together they help my skin heal and speed up cell turnover and rebuild collagen? Or that the near infrared goes deeper, reaching layers red light alone can't? It's to be expected. This isn't some Halloween mask. It's got 272 LEDs working at once, smoothing fine lines and wrinkles, rebuilding that collagen that disappears to who knows where, and actually delivering the kind of results that people spend thousands chasing in a clinic. I mean, there's a lot of science baked into this thing that make it better than all the competitors. Unlike all of them, this one's wireless. I can throw it on, grab the leash, and go. No cords, no pacing around an outlet, just real life, real science, real results. So yeah, maybe the neighbors stare, but my skin's the one that's getting the last laugh. I had this client tell me about a guy who wouldn't hold her hand in public. He said it made him feel on display. 3 months later, she realized he'd never once reached for her first. She was always the one initiating, always the one trying to close the gap. That's not somebody who's uncomfortable with PDA. That's somebody who's uncomfortable with you or me. I need somebody whose instinct is to pull me close, not keep me at arm's length. Somebody who shows affection because it feels natural, not because they've been reminded that it's been a while and they probably should do something about it. If holding my hand feels like homework to you, well, we're not going to work. I'd never date somebody who makes me organize our entire life. And I'm not talking about picking restaurants, though, but yeah, that too. I'm talking about somebody who's perfectly fine sitting back and letting me plan everything while they kind of coast along going, whatever you want to do, babe, sounds great. No ideas, no initiative, no, hey, I found this thing I want to check out. Want to do this? I had a client describe her ex this way. It was like dating somebody who showed up to a group project, had done none of the work, but still wanted credit for being there. That's exactly it. You're not their partner. You're their event coordinator, their social secretary, their reminder that life doesn't just happen to you. You have to participate. If I'm the only one thinking ahead and making plans, organizing our weekends, then I'm not really dating someone. I'm managing a very tall child who occasionally pays for dinner. And at some point, hey, I'm easy, you decide, stops being laid back and charming, and it looks just really lazy, or worse, it starts feeling like a test, like they're waiting to see how much effort I'm going to put in before I realize that they're not putting in any. I would never date someone who's decided that they're done learning. I'm done. I did it. Finished. Not talking about going back to school or reading self-help books, not necessarily. I'm talking about basic curiosity and the willingness to hear new ideas without immediately deciding it's wrong because it didn't come from them first or it doesn't match what they already think. Like they have the answers, they decided it long ago, and it's a closed subject. They're not looking to reopen things that they've already decided upon. That's just kind of a closed-mindedness that I find is a turnoff. At some point, you feel like you're dating a filing cabinet. Everything's already sorted, labeled, and permanently closed. And God forbid you try to add a new file. The whole system would reject it like a bad organ transplant. That's what happens when somebody decides they're done growing. The relationship just gets smaller every year because you're still learning and still changing, growing, expanding or so, and they're staying exactly where they've always been, arms crossed and very committed to the version of themselves that they decided on sometime around 2007. And eventually that gap becomes a canyon, and you're standing on one side thinking about how you used to be able to talk to this person, and they're on the other side wondering why you're not the same person they met, which is rich coming from somebody who hasn't had a new thought since flip phones were cool. I would never date someone who rations out pieces of themselves like they're going to run out. I'm not just talking about money. I'm talking about people who withhold everything, time, affection, energy, attention, even love. They've turned generosity into a budgeting exercise. They could give more, they just won't. They're always kind of calculating, keeping score, right? Always making sure they're not giving a little bit more than they're getting. Like love is a limited resource, and if they give too much, they'll wake up one day emotionally bankrupt with nothing left for themselves. I don't think love works like that. It isn't a transaction, and it's not about protecting yourself from being too generous or making sure everything stays perfectly balanced like a bank account, right? I would want somebody who gives because it feels good to give. Somebody who's generous with their time and their energy, who shows up fully instead of portioning themselves out like we're rationing supplies during a shortage of something that only exists in their head. If someone's treating their heart like a limited resource, they might run out of something. Yeah, that's just not my person. I would never date somebody who can't find gratitude in anything. You know the type. The glass isn't just half empty, it's cracked, the water's probably contaminated, and why are we even at this restaurant when the one across town is so much better? Right? Everything's a problem. The weather's wrong, the food's not quite right, their job's terrible, their family's annoying, that vacation they just took ruined by the flight delay, the hotel room, the fact that it rained one day, just everything for them. They're not just having a bad day, they're having a bad life, and it's everyone else's fault. And yes, I'm, making this bigger so you understand what I mean. But I did have a client who dated somebody for like 6 months. She said it was like watching somebody actively search for disappointment. They'd go to a beautiful restaurant with an incredible view, and he'd spend the whole dinner complaining about the noise level. They went on a weekend, and he'd focus on traffic on the way out of town, and instead of the fact that they were going somewhere, and not even once they made it, he'd still be talking about it. She said, I felt like I was constantly trying to convince him that life wasn't happening to him as punishment. Here's the thing, negativity is contagious. You can't stay positive when somebody's constantly pointing out everything that's wrong, even if it's just they're wrong. Eventually, you start seeing it too, the flaws, the problems, the reason things won't work. I need somebody who's going to look for the silver lining, who's got their rose-colored glasses, not somebody searching out storm clouds. And I need somebody who's grateful, someone whose first instinct is to appreciate, not complain. Because life's hard enough without dating somebody who's determined to make it harder. Yuck. So there you have it. As a matchmaker, these are my hard no's. The things that I've watched wreck relationships too many times to ignore, some of my own. And if you agree to not date somebody who checks even one of these boxes, then you're not being picky, you're paying attention, which honestly is a skill more people should develop. Okay, I hope you found that interesting or helpful. If you did, you might want to check out this episode here. Before you take off, could you give my little mama here the thumbs up she's requesting? She gets more love in the comments than I do, and frankly, I can't even be mad about it. Love the little lady. And don't forget to subscribe before you leave, because knowing what you don't want is just as important as knowing what you do. And I'll keep reminding you of both twice a week. Appreciate you being with me today, and until next time, have a good one.